A hallway fall, laughter everywhere. They thought she'd stay silent, but Naya recorded everything, every word, every stare, like the video. Subscribe to the channel, because you're about to witness how one quiet girl brought an entire system to its knees. The hallway on the third floor was packed by 9:15 students flowed between classes, fast, loud, chaotic. In the way high school always is. Lockers slammed, shoes slapped the floor. Laughter rang out like background noise no one paid attention to. In the middle of it all was Nia, 15, black slim, hugging her backpack to her chest like a shield. Head down, shoulders tucked in. Moving carefully like if she shrank enough, maybe the world wouldn't notice her. But it always did. 3, 2, 1, a whisper floated behind her. Then in perfect sync, her foot hit something soft, slimy, cold. She slipped. Not just stumbled. Her feet flew out from under, her body lifted, then slammed down hard. Her knees cracked the tile. Her bag exploded across the floor, and for a second there was silence. Then the hallway erupted in laughter. Oh my God, she actually fell for it. Did you see her face? I'm crying. Hold it up, Madison, hold it up. At the far end of the hall, Madison, blonde curls, perfectly styled, holding up a half-peeled banana like a trophy, stood laughing. Her friends, also blonde, were recording on their phones, cackling, like this was the best episode of reality TV they'd ever seen. Who let her come to school without learning how to walk? Nia didn't move at first, 3 whole seconds. Then slowly, carefully, she sat up. No one helped. Someone even stepped around her like she was spilled soda. Her uniform was torn, her shoes scuffed, her knee bleeding. But she didn't cry, she didn't beg. She didn't even speak. She looked, not in anger, not in shame. Just that blank, deep-eyed look you give when this isn't the first time, just the latest version of the same old story. A teacher walked by, saw the banana peel, saw Madison, kept walking. Everyone knew what that meant. Don't mess with the daughters of donors. Naya gathered her books, got up limping. When Madison shouted one last jab, "Careful, girl. Maybe I'll switch to watermelon next time." Naya didn't flinch, didn't look back, just clenched her fists. That night, in her black leather notebook, she wrote, "They saw a fall, I saw a warning. This one I won't forget, and I won't forgive." The next morning class started like nothing had happened. No one mentioned the fall, no apology, no incident report. It was as if what happened in the hallway was just another moment in high school, an innocent joke, an unfortunate slip. Not that serious. But for Nia, the bruises on her knees still throbbed. Her shoulders still ached, and the eyes, those ever-present hallway eyes, still trailed her as she entered the room. Only this time, no one laughed out loud. They just watched her like they were re-watching a scene from a show they knew by heart but never wanted to star in. Madison sat at the front of the room, whispering to her clique and giggling in that perfect practiced way people giggle when they know nothing will ever happen to them. She looked back at Naya once, just once, and that look said everything. You should know your place. Naya didn't look back, she didn't flinch, but inside every pulse of shame and rage carved another line into her memory, and she whispered to herself, "Watch, remember. Don't forget a single thing at break." Naya didn't go to the cafeteria. She slipped into the back stairwell of the East Building, a forgotten corner of the school no one cared about. There she sat down, opened her black notebook, and sketched a map of the hallway. She marked where the banana peel had been placed, the direction she had walked, the phone angles she'd noticed from Madison's friends. She didn't do it to report them. She didn't do it to cry. She did it to document, to preserve the truth for herself before someone else tried to rewrite it. A junior passed by, paused, stared, and kept walking. Behind her, Nia heard the whisper clear as glass. "What's wrong with her?" I thought she couldn't even speak, but Nia didn't respond. She was used to it. She knew her existence had somehow become entertainment for people who needed no context, no reason. Just her face, her quiet, her presence was enough to be turned into a punchline. That afternoon in biology, the teacher assigned a group project. Nia hadn't even lifted her hand when Madison said loudly, "We've already got 3. Sorry, full table?" The other students quickly paired up, like standing next to Nia was a social infection they couldn't risk. The teacher hesitated, glanced around, then said in the quietest voice possible, "All right, Naya, you can work alone." Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nia nodded. No protest, no sulking. She opened her textbook, started taking notes, but she also wrote day 2, still untouchable, 16th time alone. No one questions it anymore. After class, walking through the hall, She heard it again, soft but sharp. Anyone else smell bananas? The laughter followed like a ripple, casual and cruel. She didn't turn. She just gripped her backpack tighter. Each day it became more clear. This wasn't just random cruelty. It was a system, a script. And she was cast without consent as the silent, humiliated side character. But unlike most characters written into silence, Naya wasn't folding. She was documenting. She was remembering. And she was waiting. Not for rescue, but for a moment when no one could say, "I didn't know." 1 week after the fall, people stopped talking about it, at least out loud. But for Nia, it never left, because at this school, the pain didn't need to be repeated physically. It only needed to be sustained through carefully timed, targeted jokes that no one ever called out. In English class, they were reading excerpts from slave narratives. The teacher asked for a volunteer to read aloud a passage about the mixed-race child being treated like an animal. The room went silent. No one raised their hand until Madison did, slowly, deliberately. She stood up, smirked, and said with mock sincerity, "Maybe Naya should read this one. I feel like she'd connect to it." A few students laughed. Low and sharp, the teacher froze for a second, glanced toward Nia but didn't say, "That's inappropriate," didn't intervene. She just nodded and said, "All right, Naya, please begin." And so Nia read, not because she wanted to, but because she knew if she refused, they'd just find something worse to twist. Her voice was even, calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she turned the page. When she finished the paragraph, she sat down, quiet, not broken, just colder. Later in her notebook, she wrote, "Day 7, the teacher stayed silent. The class laughed. I chose to remember." After class, as she packed her things, Madison leaned toward her friend and said loud enough to hear. She sounded like she was auditioning for a student remake of Roots, more laughter, not loud, but constant. No one touched her, but everyone touched her dignity by pretending none of it was wrong. During break, Nia sat in her usual spot in the library's back corner. As she opened her notebook, something fluttered to the floor. A folded piece of paper. No name, no signature. Just a single sentence in red ink. "We replayed your fall like 22 times, still just as funny." She didn't react, didn't pick it up, just took a photo, saved it to her folder labeled "Day by Day." Not for the dean, not for justice, for proof for when someone says they're just kids. Don't take it personally, so she can say, "Let me show you the details." That afternoon, as she prepared to leave class, her English teacher approached. Nia thought maybe this time she'd say something meaningful, but no. The teacher just glanced at Nia's notes, gave a small nod, and said, "You write really well. Just try to be a little more social, okay?" Then walked away. Nia stood still, not angry, just confirmed again that most people aren't cruel. They're just committed to not seeing, because seeing means doing something. That night, she added a new sticker to her notebook cover, a small silver camera icon. Beneath it, she wrote, "I'm not the one they protect. I'm the one recording a system no one's brave enough to name." By the end of the first semester, nothing had changed. Madison was still the star of the class. She hosted the end-of-term celebration in a flowing white dress, her blonde curls shining under stage lights, that practiced pageant smile perfectly placed on her lips. As she took the mic and spoke about how magical our time at Westdale has been, the audience clapped like they were hypnotized. Someone even shouted, "We love you, Madison." And Nia sat in the back row closest to the exit sign. No one asked if she was coming. No one saved her a seat. She printed her own ticket, sat by herself, stayed silent. She was background furniture in a room that pretended to be inclusive, but she was there and she was watching, recording every glance, every sentence, every laugh. When Madison said, "Everyone at this school is equally valued," Nia smiled, not on her face but in her notes. Day 92, most meaningless sentence of the year. After the ceremony, she slipped out quietly. It was drizzling outside. The wind whipped through the main building's long hallway. At the corner where she had once slipped, tripped by a banana peel. No one admitted to, there was nothing left. No one remembered, no one even glanced that way. But to her, the spot remained. She stood there for a moment, not to relive it, to confirm it. "This is where I got up." On the wall nearby, an old laminated paper still read, "No food or drink allowed in the hallway." She looked at it, then let out a breath of something close to a laugh. Not because it was funny, but because rules are clear. Morals are up for interpretation. When she got home, her mother was boiling water. She didn't ask for a full report, she didn't need one. "You all right?" she asked. Nia nodded. "Still your daughter, that was enough." Her mother didn't ask more. She knew better than anyone what silence could hold. She had grown up in a world like this too, where black girls learned to swallow their rage, smile politely, bow slightly, and remember everything. But unlike her mother, Nia had tools. She had memory, she had data. And her mother knew one day no one would be able to say we didn't know. That night, Nia opened her laptop and created a new folder. SEM1, complete inside screenshots, videos, transcripts, anonymous notes, time-stamped audio journal, scans organized, name dated precise. When the final file finished saving, she sat up straight, looked at the screen, and whispered to herself, if anyone tries to deny it, I'll let them read it back. Exactly, day by day, the new school year began with the same old faces, same hallways, same bells. And Madison still the queen of everything, from student media club to spring festival committee. Her name was everywhere, like she didn't need to campaign, she just had to show up. Nia walked into Westdale like always, backpack, slung tight earbuds. And though no music was playing, she kept them in so people thought she was busy, detached somewhere else, somewhere safer. But at Westdale, not listening didn't mean you wouldn't get hit. 3 days into the semester, Nia opened her locker and paused. Inside, mashed between her books, was a banana crushed, rotting, sticky. The smell was sour and sharp. No one stood nearby. There were no cameras. But down the hallway, Madison's crew was laughing. Not loud, not direct, but with just enough volume and glance to let her know this wasn't an accident. It didn't need a signature because they already knew she wouldn't report it. Nia picked up the banana with a napkin, dropped it into a Ziploc bag, and walked 2 floors down to throw it away. Before she did, she took a photo. Timestamp logged, her notes that night read, Day 3, biological callback. 4 distinct laughs. 3 confirmed Madison. Hannah Chloe? 1 unknown. She didn't flinch, but something in Madison's eyes did. Because unlike past targets who cried, ran, transferred, Nia didn't react. She didn't storm out. She didn't tremble. She didn't beg. She watched, and that more than anything made Madison uneasy. A week later, Madison's group threw a surprise costume lunch on the football field. No school permission, no theme announced. But they arrived wearing leopard print rubber bananas and bracelets that spelled out Queen of the Jungle. They didn't call Nia out, but every laugh, every camera pointed her way made it clear who the performance was for. One girl mimicked monkey sounds. Another zoomed in with her phone like she was filming a documentary. Nia sat in the bleachers, reading, eyes steady, hands still. Her heart pounded like a drum behind her ribs, but she didn't move. Because she had learned if she gave them her face, her anger, her tears, she gave them a fuel. That night she wrote in her journal, they want me to break because my silence is loud enough to drown out their laughter. She stuck a post-it note beside her bed, written in red ink. I'm not quiet because I'm weak. I'm quiet because I'm turning everything into evidence. A month passed. No more tripping, no more costumes, but the atmosphere, it hadn't softened. It had just shifted. Now Madison didn't attack Nia. She acted friendly, and that was far more dangerous. Nia Yaed knew it. She felt it in the way the room held its breath. Thursday morning in biology class, Madison suddenly turned around with a dazzling smile. Nia, empty seat, here, sit with us today. Heads turned. The air froze. Nia stood still. Her eyes scanned the table, a phone on the desk, screen up, camera quietly recording, a glance from Hannah to Chloe, a tiny nod, the nod of someone who just finished setting a trap. Nia smiled faintly, said nothing, and walked past to an empty seat in the back. Not cold, just firm. Madison didn't respond. She turned back and smiled again, this time. Without warmth, the class went on. But during lunch, something new appeared on the student council board. A single sheet of paper, size A4, typed. Bold font. Anonymous. We need more unity in our student body, especially for those who are quiet and may need help. Be kind before someone has to ask for it. No author name, but everyone knew the tone. It was Madison's. That sweet poison-style offering, help only to those you've already humiliated. Nia took a photo. Logged the post not out of fear, but because when the ones who harm start posing as helpers, the truth needs better preservation than ever. That afternoon in the library, a senior, Olivia, sat beside Nia. At first she said nothing, then finally spoke carefully. I don't really know how to say this, but a few years ago we laughed too. Nia nodded, no anger. Just one question, and now Olivia paused, then said quietly, now I can't laugh anymore. Not because I finally saw it was wrong, but because I realized I was part of the wrong. Nia didn't reply. She didn't need to. That night in her notebook, she wrote, "When people stop laughing, not because it's no longer funny, but because they finally recognize they were the joke, that's not guilt, that's awakening." Week 6 of the semester. Everything seemed quiet. No banana peels. No sarcastic flyers. Madison hadn't spoken to Naya in 3 days, walked past her in the hallway, ways as if she didn't exist. And somehow that silence felt more suffocating than the jokes ever did. Because when silence becomes the norm, no one calls it violence anymore. In English class, the teacher gave an assignment: write a fictional journal entry from the perspective of someone who's been misunderstood. The prompt was perfect, tailor-made for Nia to finally speak through her writing. But as she held her pen, she hesitated. Because she knew telling the truth in a place like Westdale wasn't cathartic. It was exposure, and exposure here gets twisted faster than you can defend it. So instead, she wrote something quieter, about an invisible character. Someone who lived in the middle of laughing crowds. Someone no one ever bothered to name. The piece was short, simple. And when she handed it in, the teacher nodded slightly, then said something Naya would never forget. "You write like someone who's worn that skin before." Later that day at lunch, a classmate, Alex, walked up to her. He wasn't part of Madison's group, but he'd never defended anyone either. Today he handed her a bottle of orange juice and said, "The teacher said you nailed that piece. Really good writing." Then paused, added, "They're quiet now. Not because they've changed. Just waiting for your next misstep." Naya took the bottle, nodded. She wasn't sure whether to thank him or just record the moment. That evening, she opened her laptop and started a new file, Witnesses Who Know. She logged Alex's name. The date, the location, and a private note knows won't intervene, but beginning to acknowledge it's weak, but it's a start. She began noticing more things too. A girl who used to laugh with Madison had quietly liked one of Nia's short stories online. Someone who once reposted the hallway fall video had now untagged themselves. No one had apologized, but the little movements meant something. Some of them were starting to realize, if you say nothing sooner or later, you'll be part of the thing everyone pretends not to see. That night, Naya wrote a line in her journal. No punctuation, just one breath of thought. They haven't said sorry, but they've started to fear the moment someone asked them what they did when they saw me being treated that way. By week 8, no one talked about the fall anymore. But that didn't mean it had been forgotten. It had just been compressed into glances, into avoided topics, into the silent weight everyone carried like a bruise they pretended not to touch. On Wednesday during social studies, the teacher handed out a slip of paper to each student. Write down 5 things you wish others understood about you. Things you've never said out loud. The room was quiet, heavier than a test. When the teacher collected the papers, she paused over Nia's, just a second longer, but said nothing. That night, someone posted anonymously on the student forum, "Have you ever seen someone so hurt they don't even fight back? Just existing makes others feel guilty." No tags, no names, but the comments came fast. "I think I know exactly who. Used to laugh, can't anymore. She's always quiet. Now I think that's her strength." Nia didn't comment, didn't react, but she read them all. She saved screenshots. Each reply a crack in the mask called "Everything's Fine." That Westdale war-like uniform. The next day, Naya was invited to speak at the school's creative writing meetup hosted by her English teacher. The reason that last piece she wrote it had something no one else sees, Naya accepted. She walked to the front of the library, no paper, no microphone. She didn't tell her story. She didn't name names. She didn't talk about the fall or about Madison. She read 5 lines from her own notebook. "I was once pushed down in front of everyone. I was once dragged into a joke where no one else was laughing. I once stayed silent because no one asked. I once wrote not to be praised, but to survive. And now I still write to remind the ones who saw and stayed quiet, I'm still here." The room went still. No clapping, no movement, but every single eye stayed on her. That was the first time Naya spoke, not as a victim, not as the quiet girl, but as someone who had survived and who had no interest in erasing herself just to be tolerated. She didn't ask for validation. She didn't ask for applause. She just stood there, said what she needed to say, and sat back down. And in doing that, she proved something. Madison never could. You don't have to control a room to be the one they listen to. Early April, the school launched its annual Culture Week, a lineup of student-led activities under the theme Diversity and Expression. Anyone could submit a performance or a skit as long as it was described as lighthearted, inclusive, and non-offensive. Madison and her crew signed up before the official form was even released. Their performance title, A Day in the Life of Westdale tagline. A fun sketch reflecting the different types of students in our school. Naya read the description. Her name wasn't mentioned, but something felt off. Her instincts screamed it. She heard whispers in the prop room in the girls' bathroom. Madison's planning something wild. It's not just a parody, someone said. Bananas are involved. The day of the performance, a stage was set up in the main courtyard. Students packed the area, seniors, freshmen, everyone pressed into the sun, chatting and scrolling. A mic crackled on. Madison walked out wearing a distorted school uniform, skirt too long, a shirt button wrong, hair in two messy buns, oversized glasses. She clutched a backpack tight to her chest and shuffled onto the stage. She was impersonating Naya. Sorry, can I get through? I don't think I'm real. Does anyone see me? Laughter erupted. Her friends leaned in, shouting, "Watch out, Banana Zone!" A rubber banana sailed onto the stage, cheering, phones up, live streams running, and in the back row, Naya sat still. Her face unmoved, but inside it felt like her lungs were collapsing. No teacher stepped in. No one said stop, but something was different this time. The laughter didn't last. A few kids lowered their phones. Someone whispered, "That's not funny, it's kind of cruel." Nia didn't walk away. She didn't hang her head. She watched. She recorded every line, every gesture, every laugh that died midair. That night, she didn't write in her journal. She opened her laptop, scrolled through every note she'd logged since the start of the year. She started a new file, final setup. And in the first line, she wrote, "When cruelty stops hiding, it shows its true face. And when it steps into the light, I don't have to fight it. The light will do the work." The next day, Westdale's hallways were quieter than usual. No excited chatter about yesterday's performance. No reposts. No group threads reliving the jokes. Even though the skit had hundreds of views the night before, by morning, the video was gone, deleted, or buried. Either way, someone got scared. When Naya walked into class, the stares weren't piercing like before. They didn't ignore her either. Some glanced away quickly, a few like. Alex nodded silently. No one said sorry, but the laughter was gone. That morning in English, the teacher opened the class with something unexpected. Yesterday's performance was memorable. But if anyone in this room felt misrepresented, then it wasn't comedy, it was harm. No names, but everyone knew exactly who she meant. During break, Naya was sitting alone when a junior named Amy approached her. She looked nervous, fidgety, then placed a small carton of juice on the table. "I laughed yesterday, but I felt sick," after Nia didn't respond right away. She just looked at Amy long enough for the silence to stretch. Then said, "At least you stopped." Amy nodded once and left. She didn't wait for forgiveness. That afternoon, Madison walked down the hallway. But this time, there was no strut, no giggles, no girls at her side whispering plans for the next bit. A few students glanced her way, not admiringly, awkwardly. A couple of her usual crew were now sitting apart from her in the cafeteria. No announcement, just distance. That evening, Nia opened her final setup folder and typed a new entry. Day 134, the mocker becomes the isolated one. Not because they were punished, but because no one wants to be linked to a joke that's lost its laugh. She added a screenshot from the live stream. It captured Madison mid-sketch, her eyes gleaming with mockery. But in the background, audience members with frozen smiles, a few frowning, some already looking down at their phones. Nia captioned it, "Sometimes systems don't collapse, they just shrink back from their own shame." And for the first time in months, she wrote something she'd never dared to believe before. "Maybe I don't need to speak. Maybe they're finally starting to hear." 3 days after the performance, the library felt more crowded than usual, not because of exams, but because of something unspoken. The students who used to cluster around Madison now sat scattered. No one mentioned a day in the life of Westdale, but everyone avoided it like the memory of laughing too loud had curdled into something heavier than embarrassment. In math class, Naya sat by the window. Sunlight poured across her open notebook. She didn't write, just stared at her own hand. Calm, steady, then suddenly a folded note slid across her desk and stopped just in front of her. No eye contact, no sign of who had sent it. She opened it. One line: "I shared the video last time, I deleted it this time. Not saying sorry, but I won't do it again." Nia didn't need to guess who it was. She didn't look around, didn't trace the handwriting. She just logged it internally as another name on a growing list, people learning to stop. That afternoon, she passed the student board. A new poster had been taped up. Basic font, plain, white border. No school logo. It read, No one should be the main character in a joke they didn't write. No crowd, no names. But at the bottom, a few pencil marks had already been added. One said, "True." Another, "I've been the side character before I get it." Nia didn't reach for her phone, didn't snap a photo like usual. She just stood there. Because for the first time, not everything needed to be documented. Some things were beginning to stay without proof. That night, she sat down at her laptop, opened her final setup folder. She didn't add a new file. She renamed the folder before the turn. Then she did something unfamiliar. She opened her bedroom window, let the evening wind drift in, and sat still. No journaling, no screenshots, no internal checklist of wrongs. Just quiet. And one simple, silent thought: if I hadn't kept track, who would have? But now that I've stayed this long, maybe someone else is finally tracking with me. On Friday during lunch, something unexpected happened. Madison wasn't sitting at her usual spot. The round table near the far corner of the cafeteria, her domain was empty. Not because she was absent, but because no one sat with her. Some scattered to other tables. Others avoided eye contact, and Madison, she sat alone. Phone in hand, scrolling nonstop, but with no one replying. Nia, as always, sat by the window. Same table, same spot. She didn't look over. She didn't smirk. She didn't speak. But something was different. Today, one of the girls who had laughed the loudest during the skit, approached her. Chloe didn't pretend, didn't apologize. She placed a folded note on Nia's table, said nothing, and walked away. Nia opened it. "We weren't just wrong, we were cowards." 6 words, but they weighed more than any apology she'd ever imagined. She didn't write back. But this time, as Chloe walked off, Nia didn't look away. That afternoon, the school held its monthly student forum, a space for students to raise ideas, share reflections. No one expected Alex, the quiet kid who rarely spoke, to stand up and request the mic, but he did. He stepped up to the front, voice shaking slightly, but his words steady. "No one forced us to do wrong. We chose to be quiet." And now I realize that silence can be worse than what was actually done. I'm not here to apologize for anyone else, but I want to say this out loud. I saw and I chose to do nothing. And now I know. Doing nothing comes with consequences too. The auditorium went still. No cheers, no applause, just silence. But it was the kind of silence that says, "We heard you, and now we can't pretend we didn't." That night, Nia didn't write a full entry. She opened her journal and wrote a single line. "Silence once made me feel like I was the only one on the outside. Now it's making others realize they can't hide anymore." Senior week arrived, Westdale's most anticipated event of the year. The final ceremony was held in the main auditorium, packed with students, faculty, and a handful of parent representatives. The room shimmered with banners, bright lights, and that forced kind of cheer reserved for formal events. Across the massive screen behind the stage, the theme read, "Celebrating Growth and Resilience." Madison, unsurprisingly, was on the official speaker list, one of the senior representatives selected to speak. But this year, a new name was added, a name no one recognized. Guest of honor, Mrs. Eleanor Brooks, representative of Westdale's largest educational donor. Students whispered. No one had heard of her before, but the faculty stood straighter when she walked in black dress. Gold-rimmed glasses, composed expression. And behind her, Nia, dressed in deep navy blue, stepped into the auditorium, not as the girl sitting in the back row, but walking the aisle with presence. Madison sat in the front row. When she saw Nia following the guest of honor, her expression froze. She leaned over, whispered to someone, trying desperately to look unimpressed. The event began. Speeches, awards, usual applause, then came the final segment. The coordinator took the mic and spoke clearly and without build-up. Please welcome Mrs. Eleanor Brooks, co-founder of the Westdale Education Foundation and mother of graduating senior. Nia Brooks. The entire auditorium stilled. Heads turned, a teacher gasped. Someone whispered audibly, "Wait, that's her mom." Mrs. Brooks walked up slowly. No raised voice, no power display. She simply began, "I didn't come here to repeat what my daughter has lived through. I came to remind us, schools are not where titles are made. They are where character is tested, especially when titles are stripped away. I've funded this school for years, not to earn my daughter a seat, but to see how many people here would choose to stand when they didn't know who she was." The lights shifted across the crowd. A few lowered their eyes. The air changed, thickened. My daughter didn't need rescuing. She needed someone just once to look at her and not pretend they didn't see what was happening. Then she stepped down. No photos, no handshakes, just silence. And from her seat for the first time in 3 years, Naya was seen. Not pitied, not gossiped about, but seen as someone who had survived what they never had the courage to name. After the graduation ceremony, no one mentioned Madison's speech. No one brought up the award she received or the poem she read aloud. All that remained was a quiet weight in people's chests, a feeling that something real had just been said, and no one could pretend they hadn't heard it. The next day, Westdale felt softer. Not in fear, not in shame, but in reflection. On the library's bulletin board, someone had written in black marker, "She finished a journey most of us never even dared to begin." No name, but someone had drawn a tiny heart beside it. When Naya walked into class, no one stood up. No one changed how they addressed her. But the eyes, they were different. No longer looking through her, no longer avoiding her. They looked at her like maybe finally they saw the full person standing there. In biology, the teacher called up the first group for presentations. Madison's group, she stepped to the front, notes in hand, slides ready. But her voice wavered not from stage fright, but because this was the first time she stood in front of the class without the default safety of everyone's approval. When she finished, there was no laughter, no side comments, no eye rolls. Just silence, the kind that quietly takes the power away from someone who used to live in it. After class, Alex approached Nia in the hallway. He didn't speak much. He just handed her a worn leather notebook. Inside, the front cover was a message. "We stayed quiet once, now we record too." That night, she flipped through it, page after page, short entries. Not confessions, not apologies, just observations from students who had watched but never said anything. Small truths, missed moments, things they couldn't forget anymore. Naya placed the notebook beside her laptop, and for the first time since she began documenting, she opened a new folder. Not one with her name. She called it Shared Memory, and she typed the first line. "Not everyone was cruel, but maybe now, more people are done being bystanders." 3 days after the ceremony, the teacher's lounge was full on time for the first time in months, without a single reminder email. On the center table, the principal had printed out a single-page agenda that read, "Internal Review School, Culture and Educator Responsibility." No one raised their voice, no one rolled their eyes. But something was different. They all knew the speech from the other night had touched a truth they'd sidestepped for 3 years. The English teacher was the first to speak. She didn't look at anyone, just stared into her mug. "I used to think not making things bigger than they were was a form of protection. Now I'm not sure who I thought I was protecting. Maybe it was just my own comfort." No one argued. But a science teacher, one who had been present when Naya was mocked in class, added softly, "Silence can cut deeper than what's said out loud." I didn't side with Madison, but I didn't stand up either, and I don't want students thinking that age gives us permission to look away. Then the faculty advisor for the student council chimed in, "We don't need another workshop, we need something lasting, a space where students can document what happened without being labeled for it." No objections. One of the younger teachers got up and wrote on the board, "Westdale Archive." Not to judge, but to remember that what goes unspoken isn't the same as what didn't happen. At the same time in the library, Naya heard her name from behind. It was Olivia, a senior. She had sat through many of Nia's worst days without ever saying a word. Now she held a stack of pages in her shaking hands. "I wrote down all the times I saw and stayed quiet. If you want to add it to shared memory." Nia took them, nodded, didn't speak, but her eyes said, "I never needed a hero. I just needed someone to stop pretending." That night, she opened her laptop, entered her archive, and created a new subfolder. From witnesses. She typed the first line, "We let her carry it alone. Now we understand, telling the truth late is better than never telling it at all." In the final week before summer break, Westdale held its annual Expression Day, a student showcase where anyone could share something personal. A short story, artwork, a song, or a lived experience. Naya didn't sign up. She didn't need to. But when she stepped into the library where the pop-up stage had been set, she saw something unexpected. A new exhibit titled, "The Things We Never Said." It wasn't flashy, no spotlight, no names. Just a long wooden table with around 20 notebooks stacked neatly, each one different in color, paper handwriting. But they all held one thing in common. Inside were things the writers had never said when it happened. On the wall above the table, a hand-lettered sign read, "We don't need to redo the past. We just need to remember it so we don't repeat it." As Naya approached, a freshman standing nearby looked up and whispered, "You're the one who started this, right? Shared memory." I read some of it. Nia didn't reply, she just nodded slightly. No announcement, no badge, but everyone in the room knew. Without her, this space wouldn't exist. Without her, there'd be no place for others to release what they once swallowed. In one notebook, someone had written in rushed handwriting, "I used to be the one filming. Now I'm the one recording for real. And for the first time, I feel like I'm actually growing up." A teacher walked over quietly and placed a new notebook on the table, its cover gray. Bold letters printed across the top from adults who stayed silent. That evening, Nia went home and opened her laptop. For the first time, she didn't open Final Setup. She didn't open Witnesses. She didn't open Shared Memory. She created a new folder. A single word, Next. And she typed the first line. "They once thought they were silencing me. But it was because of them that I learned how to make truth echo even when no one's speaking." 10 years later, the red brick building of Westdale still stood, wide windows, long hallways leading toward the athletic field. But it didn't feel cold anymore. The posters on the walls weren't just slogans. They were quotes from students, many lifted directly from the original Shared Memory notebooks. One read, "If you see someone being silenced, ask, not out of curiosity, but because they deserve to be heard." In the principal's office, once a sterile, stiff space, now sat a shelf right by the entrance. 10 journals, one for each year, pages filled with what students wanted to remember, not forget. And behind the desk, no longer a figurehead of the system, but someone who had survived it. Nia Brooks, 26, hair tied high, calm eyes, white shirt, a small pin on her collar. Half pen, half camera, the new symbol of the Westdale Archive. That morning, a freshman knocked at her door. His name was Kai, young black, thin, nervous hands holding a packet of folded papers. When Nia welcomed him in, he barely looked up. "I didn't know who to give this to, so I'm giving it to you." She didn't ask questions. She opened the top page and read day 14. "A kid told me I wasn't white enough to fit in." I laughed it off. But that night I didn't sleep. Nia didn't say, "I understand." She just pulled open a drawer, handed him a fresh journal. "If you can't say it out loud, write it, and if you write it, it won't disappear." Kai nodded, eyes misty. He left the office just a little lighter. When the door closed, Nia turned her chair toward the window. She looked out over the schoolyard, the same space where once upon a time she'd slipped on a banana peel while hundreds stood by and said nothing. Now in that spot, a small wooden plaque stood. Here someone once stood back up, not to fight back, but to keep walking forward. She opened her laptop, typed a quick note into the monthly report. "A school doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a place where the once silenced can now be the ones who listen." A week later, Nia met with 3 10th graders in the school's counseling room. They were the kind of kids often labeled as disruptive, the kind teachers wrote up, but never really listened to. But today, they weren't there to be scolded. They were invited to speak. Each had a cup of tea, a blank sheet of paper, and a handful of colored pens. Nia didn't ask about what they did. She asked one question. "When you get angry, do you feel like people don't hear you, or like they never wanted to?" Silence. Then finally, a girl with a shaved haircut said softly, "Both." Instead of writing up reports, Nia handed each of them a copy of a new worksheet, not a behavior log, a feeling file. It didn't label anyone. It just asked, "What happened? What did you feel? What did you wish someone had done instead?" After the session, one of the boys, Isaiah, left a folded note at her office door. No name, just a few words written in pencil. "We don't need you to understand us right away. We just need you to stop acting like we're the problem." Nia scanned the note, filed it under a folder she'd recently created. Listening first. Later that day at the staff meeting, she presented a proposal. Each classroom would now have a small poster space called a memory spot, a place where students could post something they lived through that they felt had never been acknowledged. Not for blame, not for pity, just a way to say I was there, and it mattered. Some teachers hesitated. A few asked, "Oh, what if they misuse it?" Nia answered. Every system ever used to harm someone was once considered harmless because no one ever questioned it. After the meeting, a PE teacher pulled her aside. "I was there the day you slipped. I saw I didn't do anything, but today I posted the first memory note in the gym. It says I saw, and now I acknowledge it." Nia didn't need to say much. She just nodded. The kind of nod that says, "I don't need your apology. Just your shift." That night, she wrote the closing line of her internal report. "A school is not made of brick walls. It's made of memory of people who no longer allow wrong to repeat itself in silence." The last month of the school year arrived. Students began submitting their final social studies projects. One of the prompts this year read, "Rewrite something that was once ignored in your school experience." At first, the submissions played at safe essays about hard tests, strict teachers, unfair grading, but soon the tone shifted. One paper described the shame of bringing home-cooked meals and being laughed at. Another talked about being moved from a lunch table because they didn't match the vibe. One began with the line, "I used to think I was the problem. Now I wonder if silence was the real issue all along." One teacher, after grading her 11th paper, cried, not from shock, but from clarity. She realized the kids they thought were doing fine were surviving invisibly. Naya didn't interfere. She didn't comment. She simply created a link where students could, if they chose, upload their work to the Westdale archive. By the end of the week, over 40 students had submitted entries. None requested anonymity. None asked to be hidden. No one was ashamed of speaking anymore. That morning, an alum returned to visit. Her name was Harper. She used to stand beside Madison back then. When she found Naya near the courtyard, she didn't offer small talk. She said, "I used to think you stayed quiet because you were weak, but truth is I only acted strong because I was too weak to admit I wasn't. I teach now my first classroom, and there's a kid like you in the back row. This time I promised myself she won't have to write her truth alone." Nia didn't show much emotion, but her eyes softened. Not for praise, but because someone finally understood. That night, Naya opened the folder titled Next. She added a new section, Echoes, Voices Without Names. And she wrote the first entry, "You don't always need to be remembered as the one who said it first. Sometimes it's enough to know what you said is finally being repeated." The end-of-year gathering happened under soft sunlight. No big stage, no flashy banners. Just students sitting in quiet circles across the school courtyard, each group answering the same question. What changed the way you think this year? In the 11th grade circle, one girl raised her hand. "We used to think only the loud ones got heard. But then I read something by someone no one ever paid attention to, and I realized the quiet ones are often carrying the things we most need to hear." In the freshman group, a boy stood up. "I used to think silence meant peace, but now I think silence is sometimes where people get left behind." No one said Naya's name, but everyone knew she was sitting just beyond the edge of the last circle. Listening not to control, not to correct, just to record moments that once would have disappeared without being seen. When the session ended, a group of students approached her with a bundle of papers typed, bound, organized, their year-long memory notes collected and edited by the students themselves. On the front cover, a title, "We recorded this so no one ever has to prove they were worth being seen." She took it, didn't say anything, just nodded, then turned and walked toward the classroom wing, the very hallway where 10 years ago she had slipped on a banana peel and no one said a word. Now mounted on that wall behind a protective glass frame was a single sheet of paper, old, slightly yellowed, but preserved with care. If you see something wrong, you're not crazy. And if you feel alone, you are not invisible. Beneath it, a small metal plate, from the journal of a student who stayed silent no more. Naya paused, looked at it, didn't cry, didn't smile. She just stood there, then walked back to her office, opened her laptop, and created the final folder in the Westdale archive, its title, No One Left Behind. And she typed the last line, "I used to write to survive. Now I write so others don't have to survive. Just live."